So we did Phillies. We did Birds. The finals start tomorrow. And I got a little bit of basketball itch because I cannot wait for the finals. I think Dallas is going to win. I want to talk about it because I have the itch to talk about it. And I have a panic over the Sixers. So who do I bring in but my dear friend, Devon Givens from the fabulous All PHLY Sixers show. Devon, I need
What's
you,
up, man?
brother.
What's going on, man? Yeah, no, listen, that's a long time to not have basketball from last week with those series ending pretty fast in both the conferences. So yeah, it'd be good to have basketball back. And this matchup is really intriguing because guess what? Nobody saw this coming.
I'm thrilled by it. I'm actually really into this matchup. I think Dallas is going to win. And
I hope so.
yeah. And I don't know if it's my heart leading it, but I actually think the matchup, and I was real interested to talk to you about this because I love what Dallas did at the deadline. And this is a lesson for Morey, right? What Dallas does at the deadline, getting PJ Washington and Gafford, right? Like
Yeah.
big role players. And you look at how their bigs with Lively and Gafford have played because it's impossible to defend Luka and Kyrie. And so when you blitz them, the bigs just go to the rim. And that's why you just saw dunk after dunk.
Yeah, so when the deals went down and Dallas wasn't all that great, they were good. They weren't great. Of course, they were in the playoff mix. But when they got PJ Washington, I like the move just because, all right, I'm very curious to see him away from Charlotte. The Gafford piece on his second team playing with Washington, they're going nowhere. But you already knew what Lively was doing as a young player. You needed that extra body. Even though Dwight Powell's been holding that spot down for years, it clearly wasn't good enough. And that's why he's relegated to the bench. Job well done, though, for all the years that he maximize his potential with that particular group. And now you have these two lob threats, number one, starting with Lively and Gafford. These two, and Irving and Doncic, as we talked about on the show, and they're two of the best lob throwers in the game. And when it comes to pick and roll and setting up certain plays and manipulating the defense, as the defense has to figure out whether they're going to drop in coverage, whether they're going to press up and try to take you away from driving a little bit more and keeping you out of lane and not allowing you to get your shot, that just opens up that possibility for that lob. And let's not forget about Derrick Jones Jr., who is a crazy athlete and can catch the lobs not only in transition, but also at half court the way that he does. But when you go to the PJ Washington piece to couple it with Gafford, and you didn't know how they would perform in the playoffs. And neither, Gafford not being there, I don't even know if he's been there at all. But in terms of PJ Washington, they had a play-in situation a few years ago, and that's it. And how are they going to perform? And they have done a decent to really good job in their spots, in their roles with this basketball team. It helps when you have the duo of Irving and Doncic again, but they have lived up to their roles and maybe even done a little bit more than anticipated to help lead this number number 5 seed to the NBA Finals, where not many people felt like they had a chance going against the lineup that they had to go through to get to where they are right now. The Clippers, the Thunder, and then Minnesota to now represent the Western Conference in the finals.
Well, PJ played, against OKC was fantastic. I could see the same thing happen against Boston, where he didn't shoot really well against Minnesota, but I think he'll shoot better. He'll have cleaner looks. It's going to be really interesting how you guard Luka and Kyrie, how Boston guards them. The whole key to this thing, to me, has been Kyrie. Because Kyrie's saying, listen, I'm going to rewrite my epitaph, right? At 32 years old, I'm going to show you how great I am. And it's a shame because he drifted, and now that he's back focused, you realize how great a player he is.
Yeah, because you can lock in. It's funny following Brad. You can lock in Luka at the 30 every night. That's just what he's been doing in this postseason run. But to get what you've been getting from Kyrie Irving, and it looked like the old Kyrie Irving, where everyone talks about Kyrie Irving being a top 20, top 15 player in the league, all NBA, of course, when we're trying to put the guards together for all NBA, seeing where he fits on the first, second, or third team, that's the Kyrie Irving that you're getting right now. And For him to be doing this again and not having any of the off the court stuff that he was dealing with, focused on basketball. It seems like he has a good place. He's in a good place with his family, with his wife, his kids, his dad. Everybody, everything is good in his life right now. And you're just seeing that translate to the basketball floor, even when he's having a tough shooting night, like he did against Minnesota in just one of those games through the five. The presence is there. He has done enough damage through the first two rounds and then the first few games before he had that clunker where he's still Kyrie Irving, and you have to make sure that you check him and make sure you know everywhere he is on the floor, because if Luka's being double teamed or if Luka's getting that extra attention, then you know that Kyrie Irving is especially playing the way that he is right now, more than capable of carrying that team and getting the buckets. I mean, the way that he's still finishing over these big guys at the rim, where you just look at it and you say, all right, I know how great his layup package is and I know what he can do. There's no way he's going to make that shot. And then it just drops softly without even touching the rim between the rim and the net, and 2 points right there, plus an and one at times. The guy is just phenomenal. He's a master. He's a wizard with the basketball. His finishing ability at the rim is crazy. He's shooting really, really well. And you're right. It's really taken this next step from a team that was not in the playoffs. They were in the lottery. They got fined for tanking at the end of the season because of that reason. And here they are now in the NBA Finals. And you also have to give credit to it when you talk about Daryl Morey and what he's done. We're talking about a head Nike executive and Nico Harrison taking over at the GM spot and turning his team into an NBA Finals participant.
Well, and the other thing about Kyrie, it's not easy to play next to Luka, right? Like, especially when like you have to almost take that back seat and play off of him, right? Like your whole game has to be playing off of him, and that's where I've been like super impressed by him in that he's played perfectly as an accent to him, and where he allows Luka to be himself and dominate the ball and do everything, and then he fulfills his role. Like, it's such, like, to me, I'm most impressed about how he's adapted to playing with Luka.
No, it really is. Yeah, because when it first happened, I was curious. When the trade went down at the deadline, two trade deadlines ago, I was very curious. What do they see? I don't see it. What do they see? Of course, they're two talented guys, but how do they mesh? How do they coexist in this offense? And again, sometimes we saw them play, sometimes we didn't. There was some injury stuff. We saw it ourselves where the Sixers played them that first time together, where each of them had that 30 plus, and that was the reason why they won the game. Nobody else did anything. Those two guys had 30 plus. They went off on the Sixers. Again, they missed the postseason. So what are they going to do in the offseason? All the buzz was Kyrie was going to go to Los Angeles to team back up with LeBron James. They signed him to a 3-year extension, over $140 million, and sitting there again, scratching my head. We saw a small sample size. How did they know this is going to work? They were right. And it works. And it works because he bought in and he figured out how to play with Luka. Luka figured out how to play with him. And they surrounded them with just role players. Moving Grant Williams, that was a big part of it in that PJ Washington deal. Getting whatever that was out of the locker room that doesn't work. Same thing on the floor. And you bring in pieces that fit much better. Now, you got to hit like they did with Derrick Jones Jr. on the minimum contract. That worked. And then making the deals later on at the deadline with Washington and Gafford, those things worked. And you had to have some other things work out in your favor in this path to get there. But they did beat those teams head to head, straight up. LA, Clippers, taking down the Oklahoma City Thunder in 7, and now the Minnesota Timberwolves, where they were not projected to win that series. They've done a fantastic job. And I don't think they're going to lay down and just accept the fact that they are there. As you just said, you feel like they're going to win the series.
Well, listen, Boston's 2-1 favorite, so obviously prohibitive.
Mm-hmm.
Is this it for Tatum? Is this the defining moment? And again, it's always going to be about Tatum and not as much Jalen. I mean, this feels like, all right, Giannis did it. Like when he was pushed and it was like do or die, he did it. Is this the moment for Tatum?
I believe so. And look, give him credit too, because he always says it. We've been to the conference finals however many times they've been there. He's been in the league for 7 seasons, And he's been to the conference finals maybe 4 or 5 times already. And he said, I've done this before. We've been here. We've done that. Now they're not accepting of that as a fan base, and we are not accepting of that. I'm not accepting of that as a player. It's time to win the NBA championship. So I agree with you that this is a big spot for Jason Tatum right now. He's had a really good postseason run. They've had a really good pathway to the NBA finals. They've done their job. They haven't slipped up at all. Maybe drop a game here, drop a game there on the way to this matchup against Dallas. But yeah, Anthony, I mean, the guy's an all NBA first teamer. He's an all-star, and this is your basketball team, right? So now this is your time to get them over the hump, get them past that spot, and win this NBA championship. You've been there a few times now. It's time to get it done if you are Jason Tatum leading the Boston Celtics.
So how do you see it?
I see Boston in 7.
Boston in 7.
Boston in 7. Yeah, Boston in 7. I see this as a really good matchup. There are a lot of defenders on both sides that are going to cause problems for each. The coaching is going to be really important with Missoula and Kidd, 2 guys that have some flaws in their coaching where people have attacked them for things that they do on the floor with some of the decisions that they make. But in the end, we know that the players are going to bail or make sure that things play out the way that they do. There are going to be some coaching things that we look at back at and say, hey, good job by coach from Dallas or coach from Boston. But in this one, it's really going to be the players. I do see where how much of the defense, I'm very curious to see from White and Drew Holiday, even Jaylen Brown and Tatum, of how they check Luka and Kyrie. How is that going to work out? And then on the other side, where you have that length from Washington to Derrick Jones Jr., how are they going to now match up on the other side defending both Tatum and Brown? I'm very curious to see what the defensive matchups are going to be in these 2 teams. So I do like Boston in this one. I always lean Philadelphia when there's no Sixer situation where we have to pay attention that way. So as a rookie and as a Philadelphia native, Westtown, we played there, Westtown, Derek Lively. I'm rooting for Derek Lively as a rookie, of course, with Dallas to see if he can get it done. I love Drew Holiday though on the other side. That's the other sad part because I do love Drew Holiday.
All right, so I gotta ask you, what's the lesson of this, right? Because soon the finals will be over, and it's going to get real around here. Daryl will have to, he'll have Tyrese and Joel, and it's like, all right, how do we fill this roster? So what's the lesson of the Mavericks?
To build the best possible team around your 2 stars, 3 through 7. And if you want to extend it to 8, 3 through 8. I think that's the lesson, because when you go from Tatum and Brown, let's start with Boston, Drew Holiday, Derek White, Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis, right? That's 4 guys right there that we look at and we say, okay, those guys can play. Peyton Pritchard, a young player that is now playing in this rotation in the postseason, giving you really good minutes, hitting some shots. Sam Hauser also maybe knocking down some shots here from time to time in a big spot for this basketball team. Then you go to Dallas, and we just laid out all of their players that have given them good minutes, have given them good production on the floor in their roles that they have accepted. And that's the other key. You have to accept your role coming in here, knowing that you're going to be playing behind Embiid and Maxey. So if it's Paul George, as good as Paul George is, still is an all NBA level player, an all-star at least this past season. Yes, he's going to come in here and he's going to get a big contract should they sign him and he agrees to come to Philadelphia. But we know it's Embiid's team. There's a role there between Maxey and George to see who can do it. Guess what? You can have one night, I'll have it the other night. We can take turns in this and have that work out. But then it's what happens 4 through 7, as we just laid out, from Jones Jr. to Gafford, Lively, PJ Washington, getting Dante Exum minutes, Josh Green playing some decent minutes for the Dallas Mavericks. So it's for Daryl Morey and the Sixers, it's 3 through 7 or 8. And those role players coming in, fitting Embiid and Maxey going forward and knowing who they are in this whole thing here in Philadelphia.
So it's interesting because I was talking to somebody about the Paul George situation. And they go, here's a guy that you really would worry about, come playoff time. It's the same thing. Like you almost, it's the Jimmy and Paul George are so interesting, right? Because Jimmy's your money guy, but what happens during the regular season? Like, can you count on him to play? How many games you're going to play? You already got to deal with that with Joe, right? You don't know how many games Joe's going to play. So the regular season becomes a bit of a conundrum, and then you're just all in on the playoffs. Paul George, you don't know about those moments in the playoffs that he's going to have to step up with Joel and Tyrese. So, like, both of them are kind of like on the flip side, and they come with their own worries.
And not just those two, Ant. When you look at the rest of the names that we've discussed, from Brandon Ingram to so many other ones that we've discussed, even OG Anunoby when we talked about him, there are issues with everyone, whether it's the age and injury with Jimmy Butler and Paul George. It's the questions of focus with Brandon Ingram. Can he fit with his stylistic play with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey? OG Anunoby with the health concerns, even though the two-way ability is phenomenal because his defense is so exceptional. On and on and on. There seems to be the idea of them is perfect, but then there are these warts with everyone. And when you speak about Paul George and you and who you've spoken with, you're absolutely right, because we know that the jokes about the playoff P stuff when he was in Indiana, he's had some really good moments in Indiana when there was really no pressure because they were trying to get past LeBron James and the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers, right?
Yeah.
Then you go to when he gets to OKC, he did have a phenomenal playoff run where he was an MVP candidate that season, teaming up with Russell Westbrook. He goes to Los Angeles, and we know the big to-do about he and Doc Rivers and Kawhi Leonard and all of that, and that didn't work out. He did have, and you mentioned the Bucks run, and I've talked about this on the show when, Phoenix at the time, that 2021 Western Conference Finals, I was out there for a game, and it was game 5, I know it was, because they lost, and he and Reggie Jackson are destroying the Suns. And I'm like, why won't these guys just go away? Well, it was because of Paul George. Kawhi Leonard wasn't playing. It was because of Paul George, Reggie Jackson elevating his game. But Paul George was that good in the postseason. But more times than not, it's been a failure. And that's a big part of it. You know that the Sixers, without Paul George, as long as Embiid and Maxey are teaming up and they have the right supporting cast around them, 50 games is locked in. That's the standard for this team now at this point. Second round before this year was a standard for this basketball team. You're not looking for that third guy to make sure that they elevate past that. And is he the one that's going to do that? And the questions are fair because of his past history in the postseason. So if and when he does sign here, if that is the case, or whomever does sign here, can they help Embiid and Maxey get past that part? And then, of course, to the NBA Finals, because we're all used to what we are accustomed to, which is the 50 and then the second round. It's now time for them to get past that. Can he do that if he is to join this team?
Well, it's funny. It's why, and again, I don't know what his status is, and it's Danny Ainge, so you always have to be careful. But it's why I would love to trade for Markkanen. I just think Markkanen is the perfect fit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no one's going to disagree with you, but the cost is going to be heavy, and Danny Ainge is going to hold your feet to the fire because he can.
Okay,
right?
so what? So let's go for it. How many picks? 4?
He's gonna first he's gonna ask for 5.
Right. And I'm not going to give him 5.
Probably 4. And then he's gonna hang up the phone, and you say 4. Let's have a conversation, but it's probably still going to be too. It might still be too rich if giving up that 4 because he is on such a good contract. Because he is going to be in demand not only with you but others. If they get wind of the fact that you're talking, then somebody else is, and guess what? That 4 that you talk about is going to bump right back up to 5 because there may be that team that's willing to do it. Where maybe Daryl Morey may not.
Would you do it?
Would I do it? I would do 4, 5. No, 5. No.
At what point do you go, you know what? I have to win. And he's going to give me the best. And by the way, I got him. He's still relatively young. So It's not like, it's a player that I'm going to get and I'm going to be good because I have Maxey and I have him.
And the reason I say 4 or 5, right? We all say that's a perfect fit because there's always that possibility, Ant, that he could always go back to that Chicago, Cleveland, Lauri Markkanen.
Yeah.
Does he have that out of his system? Is he now this where he's going to be a perennial all-star? He's always going to be in the conversation of being an all NBA player. He's playing on a team that is not geared to win right now. Can he come here and be that player, to your point, help them win and do so by not reverting back to that player that got him traded to Utah and on his third team in the first place?
All right, last thing. Is there a player or two role players that you're looking at that you got circled that you think would be perfect here?
Yeah, this is fun because now you can direct people back to one of our old episodes where we talked about just this, which is one was DeAndre Hunter for me, another local kid, plays for the Atlanta Hawks. He signed a 4-year, $80+ million contract. Year 1 is in the books, I believe. So now he's on the second year. So contract is decent. 6'8", average about 16 point shot, over 35% from 3. Just needs to get out of that toxic situation that Atlanta is in. And I think that's the case for maybe a few players there. So he's one that I've looked at that we've talked about on the show. And as far as another one, right off the top of my head, as I'm trying to just go back and think again about some of the names that we did speak of that are role players that you can just bring in, not just trades, but free agents.
Hunter's interesting. I like him. I liked him.
I do too.
He scored a ball a little bit. He would be a good rotational guy.
Yeah, versatile defender at that 6'8" size. He can move, he can defend. And again, man, you don't know how that stuff. We've seen it plenty of times where guys just get out, PJ Washington, out of a bad situation, and maybe getting into a much better opportunity where they just thrive in that role. I don't know about playing at home. I don't know if he has the desire to do that and how he would handle that. I have no clue. But if we're just talking as you ask, that player, I would like that player as a role player, maybe buy low, to your point, of coming in and still being able to help out. As far as another player that I would maybe like as a role guy, I also threw another one just for fun, and Anthony Simons out in Portland. I like him. Small, so the backcourt again would still be small with Maxey, and as we discussed it, maybe he's in a better role being a 6-man, a super 6-man. But he's a player that I know that can fill it up. And he signed a 4-year, $100 million deal a couple of years ago. Portland is still not going anywhere. And they have, again, good draft picks. They have Scoot Henderson that they're maybe trying to build around. And if that's the case, do they move Simons? Do they move on from Simons if they're unable to unload Jeremy Grant if he wants out? So Simons was another one that I did bring up. Smaller guy. I understand the backcourt situations, but the scoring ability, if you put him in that 6-man role, yes, the price tag would be high, but a guy that I would be willing to say, yeah, come off the bench and just fire it up, kid.
It's going to be interesting, but I can't wait for it. Like, the summer is going to be an interesting, besides the Phillies, right, which is every night, the summer is going to be really interesting because you're putting together a whole team.
Yeah, you have 4 players on your team right now. Yes.
Yeah. It's wild.
You have to build out an entire roster. Yeah,
I know. It's going to be wild. It's going to be pretty cool. You're the best, my brother. What time for you guys today?
2:30 today. Yep, 2:30 today, Thursday and Friday as well. Some great stuff today. I think a lot of people will like it. I think you'll like this conversation today that we've already spoken about. And then Thursday and Friday as well.
Love it. Love it. You guys are killing it. Love it, buddy. Thank you, brother. The great Devon Givens.
We all silly like the mayor.